You know they're winning when every leader can say, this is how I and my team create value for the organization. And every individual contributor can say, this is how I create value for the organization. And then you just go one functional group to the next, have this really meaningful conversation around what is that number that does those two things? What are the supporting measures that will help us make better decisions? Now, what are the categories of work that we should be really good at that we can leverage and continually get better at leveraging those things to accelerate the improvement in our most important number?
Today, I have a guest that is going to leave you literally singing. But before we go any further, since I know you're going to love this podcast, make sure you like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe. So today's guest is a consummate, not only entrepreneur, but also a musician. I think he actually ranks right up there with the professionals. And if truth be told, I think, in fact, he may play his music professionally, although I don't think he'll admit to it. So before I don't need to say any more, let me introduce you. Buckle up, because Lee Benson is about to take us for a ride. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Dr. Patty Ann. It's so great to be here with you.
I am so excited to have you. You know, when I'm in a room with you, I don't even come close to being the smartest person in the room, because I am just amazed at not only how brilliant you are, but how versatile you are, and quite frankly, how humble you are. So I know you're here to talk about your awesome new book and all your great work, but I would like, if you don't mind, for you to share a little bit about your start. As we can see, if you're watching this podcast, Lee's guitars behind us. Tell us about your life as a musician.
Sure. Well, I'm sitting here in my home music studio, and there's an office portion of it where I work out of most days. And so there's guitars in the background. In the 1980s, most of those years, I played in a rock and roll band. I was in a few different bands, over 300 nights a year. It was crazy. It was so much fun. Original music, cover music. It's how I made most of my income. And it was actually my first business, if you will, because at times we had a light crew, a sound crew, stage crew. There was a manager. And musicians are really interesting to kind of work with. I mean, we're very...
Well, that's a really fun way of putting it.
Oh, sure. I mean, we're very, very emotional. I mean, our job is to convey an emotion from the stage. And so I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And the audiences ranged from, as small as just a cook and the bartender if nobody showed up, to up to 5,000 plus, in the bigger shows that we did. A lot of fun. And I'm currently on the 7th business that I've started from scratch and working my way through that. So how did I get the start?
Hang on. How did you, and by the way, for the listeners, I knew he was a professional. Did you see your music as a business, or was that a launch pad to your business?
Well, in the 80s, I saw it as a business. That was my primary business. It's how I made the majority of my income. I supplemented income by working jobs during the day, but it was my first business.
That was it. Okay.
It taught me a lot about working with people and other organizations, club owners. If you fast forward a little bit, in 97, there was another band I had called 3 Degrees West. And when we played our CD release party and we played at the Arizona Music Awards, we were offered record deals with Atlantic and Capitol Records at the time. And so it was an interesting, sort of potential fork in the road. Do I go down the road of just fully doing music and seeing where that goes? Or do I keep running my businesses? Because at the time I had 3 different companies that I was running, and I chose to keep running the businesses and play music on my time, my schedule, whatever.
Why? Because I know you love your music, but why did you make that choice?
Well, I think in the music business, making it really big and a lot of money, it's like winning the lottery. A very small percentage get there. I love playing music and conveying the emotion that we create when we're making the music. I don't need a crowd to do that, and I'm making great money running my businesses. I see unlimited growth potential over there. I can have both. Or if I just picked the music piece of it, I really couldn't have had both. And I sort of jokingly say I could have taken off and done the sweaty VW bus tour for a couple of years across the country, playing all the shows and seeing what happens. And I'm really happy with the choice that I made. I still get to play in bands with friends of mine. I have musicians coming over all the time. You'd be amazed, maybe not, but how many CEOs are really good musicians. So we get together, we have a group here in Phoenix, and they'll come in and we'll just organically play music for hours and hours. And it's a lot of fun. So I'm happy with the choice I made.
Okay. So there's two things I want to talk about with what you just said. Most entrepreneurs, by definition, are huge risk takers, right? Like crazy risk takers. But it sounds like when you made your choice, when you had that fork in the road, you opted. Was it to take the less riskier road, or am I doing you a disservice?
I think it was to take a more fulfilling road, because in being an entrepreneur in the businesses, I remember the early years when I would say started the next business. I was given this opportunity when the day job I had in late 93, there were 25 employees. I'm the general manager. We're doing electroplating, the special process to repair aircraft components. We lost our only customer overnight. They were 90% of our business, a company called Allied Signal. It's now Honeywell. And my boss said, close it or sell it. You have 30 days. And I couldn't find anybody to buy it. Went from the 25 employees down to 3. And I went back and said, look, let me assume the debt and you walk away from it. I put my house up as collateral. And I think we can turn it around here and go a different direction that he didn't actually believe in. And so we went from 3 employees in that first year doing $360,000 in sales, almost going out of business about 15 times. Talk about risk and losing my house and everything else. Funding it was credit cards, and it was all of it. So I get risk. I have a very high tolerance for it, and that just sort of built on itself. And that particular business turned into 3 different companies, over 100 million in sales, and we sold for a really nice 9-figure exit later. So it worked out. But it was always risky. It just always is. The band piece of it is a really hard life. I still stay in touch with lots of friends that have made it their whole world, and a lot of them don't have 2 nickels to rub together. They're really having a hard time right now, at this stage. So that would have been just a more difficult road, but very fulfilling. I actually know I would have been successful. I would have been a studio musician, helping people write music. It would have been fine, but right now I get the best of both worlds.
Well, of course, I mean, you answered the question brilliantly, right? You took what you saw as the more fulfilling path. You also mentioned that CEOs, many successful CEOs, high-level executives are musicians. I know that personally as well. And I know there's a connection to neuroscience. And I know this is right in your wheelhouse. So educate us in a way that we can understand that connection between music and business and critical thinking and seeing patterns.
Yeah, when it comes to connecting the dots, and as a musician, there's a lot of creativity that has to go into that, especially when you're writing original music. You're working with a lot of different personalities. You've got all of this stuff going on. What's the difference between that and being a successful entrepreneur or leader of an organization? It's and one we're conveying value. I actually think about when I think about creating value in the world, it's material value, it's emotional energy value, and it's spiritual value. So what's the mix? For anybody, it's going to be pretty individual. And I think on the music side, we're creating positive emotional energy in the world. And I believe that's the scarcest commodity we have. I'd rather live 5 years on 10 of emotional energy than 80 years on 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. So in the music business, I believe that's the goal, to create this positive emotional energy in the world. On the business side, we're creating material, value in the world, if you will. So, and it's measured by, in the for-profit world, it's going to be, whatever we call profit or cash flow, and creating this incredible environment, with all the team members to create the value, raise their self-esteem, get everybody acting like a CEO of their own role. So there's a couple of different ways of creating value, and there's a lot of creativity that goes into it. So I see the link, and a number of folks, and you absolutely get it, but a number of folks have said, I don't understand, how can you be a musician and run a company? Aren't they two completely different things? Not really, in my view.
Because?
Well, because of the creativity required, how you need to get everybody to work really well together. You're producing, you're creating value. You know that you're doing the right work on the music side when things are moving forward, and you're actually conveying that emotional energy value, and people are liking it. They get into it. And then on the business side, you know, you're doing the right work when the most important number for the business, profit, cash flow, if it's a nonprofit, it would be impact, is improving consistently, and the rate at which it's improving.
Okay, so I did want to go to the neuroscience, because there is an understanding, gross oversimplification, right? That the pathway for musicians, for mathematicians, is the same for critical thinking on some level. But you mentioned the most important number, mind. So let's go right there, because, all right, full disclosure, never watched Squawk Box before COVID, but every morning my husband has it on. So now every morning I'm home, going downstairs, getting my cup of coffee, and there's Joe and Becky and what's his name. And, you know, Becky's the mom. It's like the whole, as you know, for me, it's the people dynamic that I love, right? And Absolutely. At first I'm like, oh, Joe, this curmudgeon, but he sort of kind of has grown on me. But you are on with Jack Welch. Now, you might not know this, but I'm based in Connecticut now, and I used to do consulting for GE. Jack Welch is not my favorite guy for a lot of reasons, because he's not really, what he wrote recently after he retired from GE is not really how he led at the time, but I understand the number obsession. So talk a little bit about that. You can throw your book in there. Go wherever you want.
Okay, absolutely. Yes, I have a new book out, published it in June of this year. And the title is Your Most Important Number. And it's an operating methodology. It's a way for any organization of any type or size to create value faster and get everybody fully aligned. And what's interesting, when I was building my other companies, and the biggest one had over 500 employees, keeping everybody fully aligned is a challenge. And everybody would say that. And most companies have some form of traditional goal setting that they roll out. In fact, in my aerospace company with over 500 employees, every employee had a quality, cost, safety, delivery, and culture goal that they had to interact with on a monthly basis to keep them fully aligned from the top all the way to the front line. And I was able to do that. I have the discipline, the drive. I can do all of it. I had a number of folks try to do the same thing, and they couldn't sustain it. And so I'm looking at all the other operating systems, whether it's OKRs or scaling up, 40X, there's a whole bunch of them out there. And goal setting is a central part of it. And I realized that traditional goal setting just absolutely does not stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. So what would be an operating methodology that'll work for 80% plus of all teams anywhere, especially when a superstar leader is not in the room? And that's where I came up with the MIND methodology, which stands for most important number in drivers. And in this methodology, every team has one number that does two things. Above all others, it says you're winning or losing the game. And two, it drives the majority of the right behaviors. So for an organization at the top, there's going to be one most important number. And then every functional group or department will have a most important number that does those two things. And you can cascade this all the way to the front line. So we're working with clients as small as 4 employees that deploy this methodology, all the way to 40,000 employees. And all these teams easily bolt together. So the most important number does those two things. And the driver piece of it would be categories of work that team should be really good at to accelerate improvements in their most important number. And then there's a way of meeting that makes a lot of sense, but that's rolled into this operating methodology. This is how teams like to work. You know, if you're on a sports team, there's the ultimate score that says we're winning or losing. And we may measure 20 or 30 other things but we're measuring those things to make better decisions and take actions to improve that most important number. Now, what we're finding here, and I'm seeing it everywhere, working with hundreds of companies, thousands and thousands of teams, is that it catches fire on its own. When you deploy traditional goal setting and you back off at all from a senior leadership standpoint, everybody starts backing away from the requirement that you laid out to actually do it. Whereas with this, it actually catches fire on its own. So it's an operating methodology to accelerate value creation, and it's working everywhere. My goal was 80% plus of teams, but so far it's literally 100% of the teams are getting significantly better results faster because of the methodology.
Okay, so can you give us a concrete answer, like the sports analogy? I think everybody would get, right? Whatever number, like baseball, right? It's a statistician's dream, but every number is to drive the home, the winning number. So can you give us an example, very concrete, very simplified? You have a sales team, say, what would be their number, right? Sales is driven by numbers as well. And what is an organization's most important number at the top? Like, make that connection for us.
Sure. And so let's say at the top in the for-profit world, it's generally going to be whatever they call profit. So it could be net profit, it could be EBITDA. If it's a capital intensive business, cash flow may be their most important number, because as you know, we can make lots of money on paper and go out of business because we ran out of cash. Right. So it's going to be in the category of one of those two for a for-profit organization. Now, as you go out, you start having, well, let me back up. So at the top, when I ask what's the most important number that does these two things for an organization, I've never seen complete agreement on that. Now, isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating?
Interesting.
Right? And so if we're not fully aligned at the top, what are we cascading out to everyone else? So that's fascinating. Now, as you go out and you have—
Wait a minute. Stop the presses. Wait. You can't drop that bomb and run. So how do you get that alignment? Look, I work with business partners. It's hard. Like, getting them aligned is hard. How do you do that with a team of executives that are all type A and all right all the time?
Well, sure. I don't believe they've ever approached it that way. They haven't been asked the question, what's the one number that does these two things? And where they'll say, well, it can't be one number. There's lots of numbers involved. No, there really is one number. And then we start—
They fight your simplification?
They fight the simplification. I think a lot of folks like to make simple complex. They like to make complex impossible.
Because then they're smart.
Then they're super smart, right? And you don't want to be the one that will say, well, I don't understand anything you just said. And you probably don't understand what you just said if you were to pick it apart, right?
Exactly.
But I'm okay facilitating that and having the discussion. I said, well, of course, we're measuring a lot of other things. And what's interesting about the supporting measures is look at all this cool stuff we're measuring. And I'll ask the question, how are you using each of these measures to make better decisions and take actions to improve that most important number? And a lot of times they don't have anything. Well, then we're not going to measure it because it doesn't matter. I see a lot of CFOs that have this amazing report with all this data, and I'll go around the room and ask the senior leadership team one by one, how are you using this information to make better decisions to increase the value we create as an organization? And 95% of the time, they don't have anything. They've got nothing. So I look at the CFO, and of course, they're very proud of themselves and all the reports they put. And I love the data. I like studying it for hours to really understand the business. But I don't think that's really their job. It's like, let's have the data over here, but let's split it out. Let's help every leader in the organization discover the numbers that really matter to them with their team so they can move the needle faster. And I think that's the CFO's job is to make that happen, present the data in a way and develop the teams in a way that they discover those numbers. Because deciding what's best for everybody, giving it to them and just assuming they're going to make great decisions, I never see that work a really high percentage of the time.
It's so interesting you're using that as an example, because there's a company that I'm consulting with that's always cutting costs. It's like absurd. And the CFO is one of those penny wise and pound foolish guys. And the message as to why the budget is the way it is never gets across. And I'm thinking now, as you're speaking, other than the fact that he's cutting the number and making the number go from big to small for everything, including the number of peanuts you can buy in the kitchen, I kid you not.
Wow.
And there's so much angst within the organization. And I think if you asked him that question, he wouldn't be able to answer it other than, I'm cutting the budget.
Yeah, I always think about in our methodology, what's the best net effect? And it depends on the business, on the time frame for this, 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out. And it's that difference between cost thinking and investment thinking. And so maybe we make a little bit less now, but the net effect a year or 2 years out is going to be significantly greater.
The long game. You play the long game.
The right best net value game is how I'm looking at it, because that's always an interesting discussion. Well, short term and the numbers, that's what we have to play because it's Wall Street or the shareholders, right. And we can't do. It's all a cop out. It should be the best net value game over time. That's how I think about it. So if at the top of the company it's whatever they call profit. Now, as we go down, you get to have a really interesting discussion with each of the functional groups. So if we went to HR, and these are, companies, a couple hundred to, tens of thousands or whatever, what's the most important number that will do the two things we talked about? It says above all others, you're winning or losing the game, and it drives the majority of the right behaviors. Almost every time, the first thing they throw out, even when they've sat back and seem to be really thoughtfully thinking about it, it's employee engagement or retention. And so those are the things.
HR would say that.
That's what they say. Like literally every single time it's one of those two things. It's okay, well, let's play that out. So if it's retention and I'm running HR and we have 1,000 employees and I want to make sure that nobody leaves. So here we are 4 years into the future. My retention is over 90% and 70% of our team members can't perform at the level we need them to for the role that they're in. But I hit my number. So that didn't drive the right behaviors. And I think a way better, most important number for HR, and it's my favorite so far, is percent seats filled with capable people. So if you had 1,000 employees, you have 900 seats filled and 100 that you're trying to fill. But let's say 100 of those employees are not performing at the level they need to. We're currently at 80%. Now we're driving all the right behaviors. We're developing leaders to develop their team members. We're looking for capable people. And part of that design would be for every role, we need to have clearly defined 1 to 4 outcome-based responsibilities that we can objectively, measurably determine if they're meeting the requirement, over-delivering, or they're falling below. So that's an example of a most important number that really will, move the needle for the company, say whether the HR team is winning or losing, which is really about supporting leadership throughout the organization with whatever they need, and fully drive all the right behaviors. And then we get over to finance. That most important number could be cash flow. And again, helping all leaders discover the numbers that will allow them to make the best decisions to really move the needle. And they need to be able to articulate that and what they're doing with their team members. I personally want every team member in an organization to think, feel, and act like they're the CEO of their own role. They're running a business within a business. I'm a leader with a team. This is my business. I'm an individual contributor. This is how I create value for the organization. And with the CFO, and this example is the most important number being, cash flow. And improving that, they're winning when every leader can say, this is how I and my team create value for the organization. And every individual contributor can say, this is how I create value for the organization. And then you just go one functional group to the next, have this really meaningful conversation around what is that number that does those two things? What are the supporting measures that will help us make better decisions? Now, what are the categories of work that we should be really good at that we can leverage and continually get better at leveraging those things to accelerate the improvement in our most important number?
Okay, so for what you just described, to go back to HR for a moment, it sounds like your most important number would eliminate the whole quiet quitting, because people are in seats and they're not, I'll say it my way, they're not operating at a 10 out of 10. Maybe they're operating at a 7.5 or 8.
Yes, I believe.
You hesitate.
Well, it's such a big thing, and it's a really important thing. I think the number one job for leaders, well, for the CEO, her job, for example, would be to continually.
So politically correctly, go ahead.
So, but no, literally continually increase the value the organization creates and accelerate that over time. That's their job as CEO. And then as you go out, the second job, and this is so critical to making it happen. I think it gets at the quiet quitting and some of these other things going on, where the Great Resignation, et cetera. Create an environment that releases the positive, intrinsic, productive energy from everyone, to where even for 20% more money, they wouldn't want to work anywhere else because they don't want to lose the feeling of this winning team that they're on.
Now you're talking culture, right?
Now we're talking culture. And I think connecting, in fact, I have a webinar coming up later this month about connecting culture to financial results. It really is the X factor. And you can very intentionally and objectively drive culture and connect it to financial results. So I think that's a really big part of every leader's job, is to create that environment that releases that intrinsic, positive, productive energy.
So this will probably be broadcast after your podcast, after your webinar, but I'm sure you'll have a link for it. So tell people how they could sign up for it, look for it, check it out. But what you just mentioned, the webinar, because I think I signed up for it as well.
Well, thank you. And absolutely, just go to yourmostimportantnumber.com and you get access to lots of free resources, including webinars. Any webinars that were missed, there's links so you can watch them. You can order a copy of my new book, Your Most Important Number. And there's nuggets in there in the book and the tools that we have on yourmostimportantnumber.com. For anyone, whether you're leading an organization, you're a leader at any level in an organization, or you're an individual contributor, it'll give you tools and ideas to make things significantly better.
Right. I'm going to tell people at the end of the podcast how they can find out more about you and get all your good stuff. But you just mentioned the webinar, so I figured, what the heck? Let's tell people how to get that info. Yeah, so perfect. You talk about driving behavior. Now you're talking my language. Right? Like, I hear data, I hear numbers, I get the heebie-jeebies. But talk about, because I know so much of your work is about the people. You just mentioned it now with culture, wanting to feel, I'm going to say it, a part of something greater than yourself, right? A reason to come to work. You're a part of a team. It's not just about, me, it's about we. Everybody talks about that. Noise. But I don't know what the percentage of the companies are that actually live it. Perhaps you do. So I know you've worked with other companies. I know from an education perspective, you've been instrumental in driving awesome change in the education system in Arizona. I think, is it that people can take their individual tax dollars and go to any school they want? Is that what you did?
Yeah, we have. There's a number.
Amazing. This man is a genius.
Well, it's A for Arizona is the organization. AforArizona.org is how you would go look at what we're doing. And our CEO, Emily Ann Gullickson, has done an incredible job. They're using the MIND methodology to create value. We just lapped our second year, and they brought in tens of millions of dollars for these different programs and passed lots of legislation that's getting national attention to create better conditions for kids to learn. And so this is all about creating better conditions for K-12 students, including transportation. So one example, we have transportation grants where we're giving tens of millions of dollars away to people applying to get kids to be able to go to schools that are typically out of the radius where they normally could go. So even though we have backpack money that you're talking about, where a parent can put their kid into any school in Arizona they want to.
Got to get there. They got to get there.
Yeah, most families can't get them there. And so now with this innovation and transportation grant, we can get them there. So now rather than one low performing school, they've got access to 10 or 20 schools they can go to. It's so great.
It's so great. So you got this buy-in. I'm connecting it because you use the business concept, your mind concept, right? Now, we all know that, the educational system and business, like, you can't even say the words in the same room, right? The budget is insane. It's bloated at the top. So how did you do that? How were you able to get buy-in from the academic community? Can I say unions? I don't know.
Well, this nonprofit, their most important number is what percentage of our 1.3 million K-12 students have access to high quality classrooms. And so that's what we measure. And so the mind
method. Low number? Was that like a pathetically low number?
Well, not only low, but there's a lot in the system with teachers unions and just a ton of stuff going on where they lobby hard not to be measured. Don't even want to be measured.
Wow. They don't even want to know. They don't even want to know.
They don't even want to know. And I made up these t-shirts that says it's all about the kids, ... change my mind. And so as we go in, we're completely nonpartisan. We're about creating better conditions for kids. And everybody's coming on board from both sides. Those that don't like it, if you look at the transportation grants that are going on, there's a lot of, I call them the yellow school bus contracts, where those things are in jeopardy if the money's going somewhere else, to provide less expensive, very safe and better transportation in terms of the flexibility to get the kids to the schools that they want to go to. So the MIND methodology totally works over there on that side. It's just a way of focusing on what's most important. Every decision, every action is about getting more aligned around what we can do to improve what's most important. So we're seeing it everywhere. We have lots of nonprofits that are getting extraordinary results. And, most nonprofits, unfortunately, I think they're just trying to survive and make payroll and not really have the impact. And so our goal is to very quickly better define the impact that they're trying to have, solidify the programs to objectively prove we're having the impact and get more people to support it. So when all that stuff is going on in the nonprofit world, it's not uncommon within 2 years, they're raising 3, 4, 5 times the amount of money that were the year before we started engaging with them. Because now we're really moving the needle and making some great things happen.
I really don't want to have a political discussion, but I really wish you could take this national.
Well, you know what, we are. We have, I think there's up to 20 other states that are asking us to help them pass the same legislation. How did you do it? Will you help us do it? And we are, and it's exciting. And I think they're our future. When kids launch out of high school, I want them fully ready to be a productive adult and survive emergencies, cover themselves, help friends and family, causes that make sense, et cetera. Okay.
So last question on this, although, as you know, because Lee and I, we met a couple of years ago. We were sitting in a courtyard outside a Genius Network event, and you were telling me about this program. It was about 95 degrees in the shade because it was Arizona. We were sweating a little bit, but it was an amazing conversation. And it's so heartwarming to see how it's come to fruition. Let me ask you the question this way. What is a common main obstacle that you faced launching this incredible, I'm going to go into call it educational opportunity for children, and what you see in the business world? And you talked about alignment. I'm wondering if the main obstacle is in there or something totally different.
Well, what is the biggest obstacle to this operating methodology is going to be the mindset of the senior leadership team. Yeah, that's going to be the biggest obstacle.
Okay, so when you have an ego the size of this room, how do you tackle that?
Well, there's so many ways you can run at it. If the senior leader,
one that works,
one that works. Most of the time we can get it to work. I'd say out of 100 clients, 2 of them won't work, and we know it right away, and we don't even engage with them because the senior leader isn't willing to be transparent with the most important number. And so if you're not going to share that because you're worried about everybody knowing how much money you make or whatever that is, then it, the most important number in driver's methodology is just not going to work. It's just not.
And in fairness to most CEOs, you always have the outliers, but in fairness, they really want to do right. They do want to do profit. They do want to do the right things for their people.
They do.
So they probably are open to you.
They're open. They want it, but are they willing to do it? And one of the things about the MIND methodology is it requires a lot of transparency, and it exposes everyone. right? So you have to be willing to sit at that senior leadership table and be open to new ideas and continually improving. And some people can't handle that. And this will expose a CEO that's really insecure and not willing to learn and grow and create more value that way, probably more than just about any other methodology. So that can be a challenge, but it literally happens maybe 2 out of 100 clients where we actually see that.
Okay, so what you just said about the transparency and that being a process that has to be overcome, which you do 98% of the time, right?
Yes.
So that what's screeching it to me in my brain is, so you're dealing with creating enough trust at the highest level where leaders will become vulnerable, allow themselves to become vulnerable. So how do you approach that? How do you manage that?
The way we look at this, we'll come in, we have the discussion about the most important number. We all agree now. So that starts aligning the work, and people are less defensive around that. So that actually works. We agree on the categories of work that holistically affect the organization, or if it's an individual team, that team and what they can leverage. That gets rid of a lot of the defensiveness, and everybody knows more what to do and what the goal is. So it just feels better in that environment. So that helps a lot. We'll often have leaders and individual contributors that really aren't living up to what that role requires, right? And I see it everywhere. So we come in and we think, okay, we've defined the outcome for the organization. We've got the drivers. We look at the structure for the organization. Do we have all the pieces that we need, departments, functions, it could be partnerships, et cetera, required to create the value to drive this most important number for the organization? Great. Now, within this functional structure, have we defined every role and the outcome-based responsibilities for each of those roles? And there's never more than 1 to 4 outcome-based responsibilities for each role. There just isn't. There might be a list of 30 things they need to be capable of doing.
Sub actions.
Yeah, but only to achieve those outcomes. Now we look at people. So when we do the design, it's outcome, structure, people. So who do we have that can achieve those outcomes? And most organizations go the other way. They say, well, these are the people we have. Let's see what they can do. And that's not an intentionally designed value creating organization. And so once all this is laid out, it becomes really apparent who can and who can't actually, achieve the outcomes for their role.
So do you find that you're helping companies move the seats around more than having people have to leave the organization? It's just that their unique ability, as Dan Sullivan would say, is not being accessed in a particular role. Yes,
it could be both, right? In some cases they move around. In other cases, we find them another place to work, another company that's better for them.
Okay, so how did you get from being a musician to a data-driven, successful CEO entrepreneur? What was the personal journey? I don't know if it was a transformation, but what was the personal journey that you went on? Tell us about, we know you're Lee, a brilliant businessman, a brilliant entrepreneur, but tell us about Lee with that beautiful smile, the good guy. Tell us about Lee, the person.
It was a blended journey to get here, but I go all the way back. In the last 5 years, I've spoken to probably 3,000 plus high school students, mostly seniors, some juniors. And I espouse the virtues of entrepreneurship. And my view, anybody starting a business and creating a job is my hero. Mm-hmm. And I talk about my journey and where I go. And I call it the value creation stressing journey. So by the time I'm 7 years old, I'm pulling weeds for a quarter an hour. And then pretty soon I've got this circular, I'm delivering papers, and I have full-blown paper route. And then I've got 4 paper routes. Then I'm a dishwasher, a busboy, a cook. And so by the time I was actually kicked out of the house, the beginning of my senior year in high school, it was a no-brainer, no issue whatsoever to afford my own apartment, finish my last senior year in high school. So I started early, and it gave me
May I ask you, you're a really nice guy. What could you possibly have done to have gotten kicked out of your house?
Well,
you selling weed or something?
No, not at all. The reason I was given at the time is that I went to school during the day. I worked virtually every night in a restaurant. I was never home. You're not here. You shouldn't be. But that really wasn't it. Unfortunately, my parents had a hard time raising themselves. It was a pretty difficult environment, and never held anything against anyone going through that. It was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me. And my point here is that
most successful entrepreneurs have had incredible trauma. Most people have had trauma.
Yeah. And relative to them and what they can handle and all of it. But because I started that value creation stressing journey early and I started building on it, I never stopped and I loved it. And when I talk to the kids and I ask them, well, given my history and there's so much more I could go into there, but I go into it with the kids when I have these talks. Did I have an advantage over you or a disadvantage? And most kids would say a disadvantage, but a few of them get it. No, you actually had a huge advantage because you're learning all this early and building on it. And a lot of us, here we are seniors in high school and we're scared to death to go into the world, and you're already in the world. And, by our age going through, said, yes, absolutely. So I'm on this really big kick to get every kid to start this value creation stressing journey earlier and earlier and earlier. And getting money from family members doesn't count. It's got to be the real world with real people where you're exchanging your best efforts for their accumulated best efforts, their money, and they see enough value to pay you for it. Now you actually have something.
Well, it's like the guy that's, was born on third base and he acts like he hit a triple.
Yes. Absolutely. It's and it's challenging because a lot of parents with the best of intentions, I want them to have a better life and everything else. And you get this way more than I do. We mess them up. We don't set them up for success. And we go into what I love to call, and I've seen this coined before, the emerging adult phase, 18 to 36 or something like that, rather than being an adult by the time you're launched out of high school.
Well, I feel, this is a personal opinion, a lot of the angst, the depression, the anxiety that's going on in the world, a lot of it has to do with the fast pace of change. We can't even internalize, process what we just learned yesterday, and the technologies, it's already outdated, right? And so all of technology, right? The yin and yang of like physics, every action an equal and opposite reaction. Technology's fabulous. It's also ruining people's lives. But on top of that, I feel what is going on, and we're going to have to deal, and we already are having to deal with this in the business world, the entrepreneurial world, is the biggest way parents have failed their children for, I would say, 2 decades now, is they have not allowed their children to fail. It is an epic parenting failure that especially in the States, it used to be that you had the helicopter parents, right? Hover over the kid as soon as they fall, you pick them up. Now we have the snowplow parents, where the parents are snow plowing in front of the kid to smooth the way so they don't even fall. Now you go into the work world or you get married, and guess what? Your boss and your partner does not think you're the best thing since sliced bread. And guess what? You're not always right. And oh, by the way, you sort of kind of might suck. What do? You collapse and you fall apart. So I agree with you there, but do you feel differently about anything I just said?
No, I completely agree. And it's all with the best of intentions.
No malice. Correct. Okay. So what you did, and this is, any entrepreneur needs this to be successfully. You, at an early age in high school, 16, 17, said, you might not have even said it, but innately you knew you either were going to allow yourself to be a victim or a victor. Did I lose you? Oh, I can't hear you, Lee. Whoops.
I apologize.
There you go. That's okay. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Somebody was doing work outside my window and I couldn't hear you, so I had to move in here so I could hear you.
It was brilliant. You missed it. It was just brilliant.
Was it? Okay. Yeah, there you go.
It happens to me all the time. Like I start to do a podcast or a course, and the jackhammer starts digging outside my window. So
that's totally when
I lost you. There you go.
That's totally where it starts. Yeah. Or when it starts. But yeah, I think you're completely right. With the best of intentions, parents are making it worse for the kids.
So what I had mentioned that I think you missed was at an early age. I don't know if you made the choice. I suspect you might have just done it. You made a choice to take your circumstances, and you could have been a victim, but you decided to be a victor.
Absolutely. And if I was going to add to that, or I should add to it, I could trust that. So
Wait, are we in your studio?
We are in my music studio.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. My thinking back then, the home environment wasn't just dysfunctional, it was toxic. There was a lot of really bad things that were going on. And when I was out there in the world trading my best efforts, mowing lawns, shoveling snow, et cetera, I could trust that I could create more value. I would get paid more. I felt valued in what was going on. And I just kept building on that over time. And I think it saved me in such a big way from the dysfunctional and toxic environment that I was in. Mm-hmm. And turned out great. Spent a lot of time with nonprofits trying to make a real difference in the world.
That is great. What would you say? Because and don't be humble. Clearly, you are so gifted and so talented. I mean, if somebody is lucky enough, like I've been, to spend 5 minutes in your presence and speak with you, it's like you just want to just like listen. Like just even me, keep my mouth shut for 2 minutes. Out of all your attributes that you feel has made you successful, what would you say was the most important one?
I believe it's helping everyone, create more value for everyone in the whole world. Like help everybody whenever you can. I mean, we all have limited, capacity to do that. To create more value in the world. And when that happens, more things sort of expose themselves to me and opportunities. It could be investment opportunities, it could be new clients, it could be new friendships, et cetera. I've always done that. It's just been in my bones, seeing examples in the home where I didn't want to be that way. And I learned more from folks about what not to do than what to do. Because for me, I just really internalized that. And try to do it better. But what I noticed in my larger, business with 500 employees, it was such an incredible community. Every weekend, there's lots of things going on. People are helping each other. When tragedies would happen, they would all surround an employee and support them. So this is incredible. And so I've thought this for decades now, but if we can strengthen communities where they have each other's backs, especially in bad times, you need less and less support from government. And I think it's the answer to everything that's wrong right now. And I wish our elected officials, just like a strong community, should be doing everything they can to create better conditions to work, live, learn, and play for every citizen here, not gain power, keep power, grow power, money, all the things that are going on. Healthy communities just do it better. And so what I believe in the MIND methodology, when you deploy this in an organization, when you start, it could be a really dysfunctional culture. After a year, everybody's having fun. It's so different. It strengthens the community. And so I was able to impact thousands in my different, companies. And I looked at the company as a community, the employees' families as a community, their circle of friends, other things that they engaged with, our contractors, our customers, they can all feel it. So now my goal is to get it to tens of millions of people in terms of how the MIND methodology touches them, because it really strengthens the community. It teaches people how to create value faster. It elevates self-esteem. That's where I want to make a difference in the world. So my exits have been, I think I said it earlier, but from a few $1 million to hundreds of millions of dollars. And I do this work because I love the work, and it really keeps my brain, moving, and I keep growing personally and professionally by doing it. I'll never stop as long as I can do this. This is so important.
So if I may, there's so much I want to comment on, and thank you for all of that. But it just feels like, when life gives you lemon, you make lemonade. It feels like you're doing for everybody what you wished came easier for you, what was done for you, because, healing yourself by healing others, being a servant leader, that's how you describe yourself. And, the community helping each other. The word tribe and tribal has a negative connotation today, but that is in fact what a tribe does. You gather around, like nobody starves or everybody starves. There's enough to go around. There's not hoarding. There's a sense of, as I said earlier, the greater good, the commune, the community. And it's brilliant. And to be able to do that on a global level, good Lord, Godspeed. I'm going to make a big assumption. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
That you're happy. When did you know you were happy? Because you couldn't have been happy in all those years in that toxic environment.
When people throw out happiness and
use any word you want.
And easy and all of it, I think it has to be hard at the right interval for everyone to grow and to truly be happy from time to time, because you can't be happy 100% of the time. Now we're back to what parents are trying to do for kids, and then they don't develop character. So I think it's everything I went through. I'm thankful for everything. It made me who I am, how I look at the world, how I think about creating value, all of it. And I said it earlier, the scarcest commodity to me is not time, it's positive emotional energy. And you have to have lows to have higher and higher positive emotional energy that's real. It is the way I like to think about it. So what's easy for me to deal with and handle today, 20 years ago or 10 years ago was hard. And so I just love that growth path, and it can't be always easy and smooth and everybody's happy all the time. And again, you know this again better than I with the work that you do, but I intentionally think about that stuff. I want to grow. I think I can change how I feel about things, but you have to work at it over time to make it happen. And this is just part of how I'm looking at the mind methodology and working with teams and developing everybody to go down that road. I love starting with a client or a team anywhere and then reflecting back a year and how it's so different and how the conversations they have, how they feel about things, their self-esteem, all of it. It's incredible.
So it sounds like you thrive in the challenge of the processes, and you're thrilled when you see others, I'll just say, get it. What drives you in your personal life? Because this is all work.
Yeah. For me, it's all blended. So I do this in my personal life as well. Selfishly, when others do well, and things get better, like the kids in high school that I talk to, if they launch, faster and better into adulthood. Selfishly for me, I feel good, and I want to feel good when I help somebody. So
there's good selfishness. That is, please bring on the world more selfish people like Lee Benson, for crying out loud.
Well, I say, because people use selfishness as sort of a bad thing. It's like almost bad, but everybody does what's in their own best self-interest. So by definition, we're all selfish, but are you win-win or you win-lose, right? Which is what you're talking about? Or are you somewhere in the middle? And a lot of people are floating in the middle somewhere. But I think it should be win-win. So the more of this work that I do, it's just a better world for myself, my family, my friends to interact with. And that makes me feel good. I feel like I'm doing the right work, and I love to feel good. So I'm very selfish that way.
It's your life to live. And people also say narcissism is a bad word, but there's such a thing as healthy narcissism. It's why we get up in the morning and wash our face and take a shower, right? It's healthy narcissism. All right. Absolutely. More questions. Anytime I speak with Lee, I always say I could speak with him all day. Let me correct myself. I could listen to him all day. 2 more questions, and then I'll let you go, because I just want to respect your time. What's the last book you reread, and why?
So I read a couple of books a week.
Of course.
One that stood out, and I actually listen to them when I exercise. It's hard just to sit down, but I'll go on 10-mile hikes right behind my house, and I listen to books. But one I really loved here in the last month was Amanda Ripley's High Conflict.
Mhm.
And she interviewed me a little over a year ago as she was doing research for the book. And she describes how people get to the state where math, common sense, logic, facts don't matter. They just take a position. They're in high conflict. I'm good, you're bad. I'm moral, you are immoral. And you'll only be good or moral when I say you are, based on some standard that's not reflective of what's really
State of
happening.
today's politics, the state of the political world today.
Right. And
Exactly.
because of this high conflict state, she makes a really good case to say, this is why it's so easy to manipulate everyone. And this is how to recognize when you're in that state, how to get out of that state, because the story that got you there is the reality is almost never what you
It's
think
just
that it
a
was.
story.
I
It's
loved it.
just a story.
Have you read that book yet, by chance?
I know of it. I haven't read it, but can you send it to Washington, to every single person in Washington, please?
Oh, I think every adult on the planet should read that right after, of course, my book, Your Most
Oh,
Important.
of course. Of course. Oh, of course. Of course. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I haven't read it myself, but I'm going to, or listen to it. My last question, which I can't wait to hear your answer to, is what is the one song you cannot live without?
Oh, that's such a great question. There's so many classics. Oh my gosh.
You got to pick. I'll give you two.
You know what? I'm going to go back to the beginning and just say Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. Like, the world needed that song, and I'm so glad it's here.
Well, and why is that? Why do you feel that way?
Just sort of a classic, iconic rock song that every guitar player, played. I started playing guitar when I was 5 years old. I don't remember what it was like not to be able to play guitar. I have 50 guitars hanging around my studio here. That was
literally.
Yeah, I do. And that was, one of the first songs that I learned in a junior high school band that we played together. And it's just such an iconic song that everybody recognizes, and everybody will have their song. But I think that what a great foundational song, in my history of learning to be a rock guitar player back in the day.
That is great. And now, I know you mentioned it a little bit before, but please let our listeners know where they can get your book, learn more about you, find out about your work, tell everybody and their mother about your mind map program.
Absolutely. So the mind methodology, it's completely framed in my new book titled Your Most Important Number. And you can order a copy of the book just by going to yourmostimportantnumber.com, and you can get it in all forms. I believe it's in 40,000 channels out there. But also you can get a lot of free material. There's access to previously recorded webinars. There's lots of free tools. You can sign up for different communities within the mind methodology, various communities that we've set up. And just a lot there. So again, just go to Mind Methodology, themindmethodology.com, and you can get all those resources.
Okay. Lee, thank you. I am so, so grateful to have you as a guest. I would have you again if you would share your wisdom one more time.
And Dr. Patty Ann, I love speaking with you. It's like every time we talk, I feel like we could keep going for 3 days.
And we will in November. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lee.